Hi there, it's Rick Hansen here with Amazing Greats, and we are talking with Arlyn Lawrence, a self-confessed book nerd, an author, and a developmental editor. If you're not sure what that is, you'll find out in this episode. We'll also talk about how to know if it is God talking, the power of prayer, and the amazing rescue of a 4-year-old boy on Mount Rainier. It's all here, and it's a good one. She's just authored a new developmental Bible study book for women called Woman at the Well. And she has 2 more similar books coming up. Let's get rolling with Arlyn Lawrence. We have the distinct pleasure today of talking to Arlyn Lawrence. You know, her credentials are spectacular in terms of authorship and editing. So let me run through a few of those embarrassing things that I'm going to bring out about you. And they're embarrassing only because they're flattering. So first of all, you're a developmental editor, which I want to know a little more about what that means. You're a speaker, a founder, and president of Inspira Literary Solutions. You've been the editor and co-author of numerous books and curriculum resources published and distributed around the world, as a matter of fact. And you've had the best-selling Wall Street Journal and USA Today bestsellers. And not only that, you live on an island in the middle of Puget Sound of Washington State that we both happen to call paradise,
Indeed.
even though it's actually Fox Island.
It is a little bit of paradise. It's our bit of paradise.
It is. It is. So let's start. Now, I originally learned about you. I got your name at the very beginning from Jeff Kemp,
So
quarterback from the Seahawks, who wrote a book called Facing the Blitz. And you were instrumental in helping him edit that and do all kind of the prep work and the behind the scenes stuff with Jeff. And he'd mentioned you to me because he knew that I was around Gig Harbor and thought you were as well. So he mentioned your name. Anyway, so you've just released this all new book 2 days ago, right? On
that's right.
Valentine's Day of 2024.
Yes.
And that is called Encounters at the Well. And we're going to talk about that in just a little bit. So I'm done talking now. I want to hear you talk for a while. I want to know about this incredible. One of the amazing things about you is this amazing family you've raised, like 5 kids. Tell us how that was.
They're my trophies. Oh, you want to know how that was? That was pretty crazy. Raising 5 kids. My husband and I have 5 grown kids between 26 and 37, which I can't even believe. The oldest 4 are married. The youngest one lives on Fox Island.
Oh, nice.
And the oldest 4 are married and have children. So we have 11 grandchildren, going to be 12 in
Oh
May.
my gosh.
Um, and
Wow.
2 sets of twins in there. Our oldest son had twins, and then 9 months later, our daughter had twins. But growing up, it was crazy. I homeschooled for 14 years, and we did all of the things that homeschool families did. And we had basketball and dance lessons and horseback riding lessons and basketball and oh, insane having 3 kids on 3 different baseball teams, and my husband was coaching 2 of them. I sometimes feel like I had a dream about this woman who had 5 kids, like it was like it happened to somebody else. But no, no, it happened to me. And they're wonderful. Our kids are our best friends, and it's amazing having a family like that. Crazy, but so amazing.
I can imagine. I have one son who's now
Yeah.
28, and times 5, that sounds crazy. So
You know
that's,
what? If you have a son that's 28, our kids probably went to school together.
I bet. Yeah. Uh, Gig Harbor High School and all of that, probably. Yep. Yeah, yeah, very cool. So that was your family, but let's go into the Wayback Machine and find out about your upbringing. Originally from Canada, is that right?
I am Canadian. Yes, originally Canadian. I'm a dual citizen now, but yeah, originally Canadian. I was born in Winnipeg, sometimes called Winterpeg, very cold.
Yeah.
And when I was 11, my parents moved out to the West Coast, which I'm so grateful because in God's timing and perfect plan, that's where I met my husband. The church that our family started attending, my father-in-law's passed. My late father-in-law was the pastor. So my husband and I met in Sunday school in the 6th grade. And so that's our
Wow.
exciting meeting story. And yeah, I grew up in a Christian home and really, really grateful for that.
Okay, so now, everybody's got their own like Christian story, and
Mhm.
that's what we love to hear is what brought you to Jesus. Obviously, you were introduced early on, but was there a time, a pivotal moment where he became real and there was a relationship with Jesus? Some people that's it's kind of a growing thing. Other people it happens in a flash. What was
Yeah.
your story there?
As a teenager, I kind of, dabbled with the dark side a little bit, just like, is this real? Is my parents' religion my religion? Is my parents' faith my faith? And I was married very young. I got married 4 days before my 19th birthday. And when I was 18, so just prior to getting married, I really did have a revelation that, Um, what little at that age, I dipped my toes in the water enough to know that this was not the direction that I wanted my life to go, and very quickly came back in line myself with God's love for me, not because my parents had raised me that way. And as God's timing and plan would have it, my husband, even though he grew up in Canada, had moved back down to the States after high school and joined the Marine Corps. And his first duty station was Okinawa, Japan. So our first 2 years in of marriage, we were on the other side of the ocean. This is back when we didn't have cell phones, we didn't have FaceTime, we didn't have computers. So phone calling was very expensive. So we hardly talked to our family. It was just the two of us and God. And during that time, I read C.S. Lewis's book, Mere Christianity. And it really did something to me, because if you've ever read that book,
Yeah,
he starts with, this is a rock. And he proves the existence of God, the existence of a moral God, the existence of a moral obligation to God, his mercy. I mean, it just kind of put everything into place. And from then on, God just put amazing disciplers and mentors in my life. And I grew and haven't looked back. I've lived how many years? 40 years since then, walking with the Lord. And I'm so grateful for that.
yeah. Mere Christianity is a great, great book, great introduction. C.S. Lewis himself was a convert, and he's very clear on his evolution as a Christian. So he's it's one of those books that if you're a Christian, you should read for sure. Yeah, yeah.
And if you're not, it's a good book to read because it really just lays it out there. Yeah.
Yeah. So you were always a reader. You were
Mhm.
always a book person and
Yeah.
loved the written word. And that's kind of how what launched you into this whole area of authorship and editing and all of those things you're doing. Tell us about how all that and God's goodness in all of that.
Sovereignty and goodness. Yes. And probably sense of humor too.
Okay.
Um, So I was always a book nerd, always loved books. My dream when I was a kid, I thought I wanted to be an English professor. That was kind of the direction I was headed. And we moved back from California, and I was about to go back to school and go on that road. And we discovered we were expecting our first child, which completely changed everything. And I was committed to being home with our kids. Um, and we ended up homeschooling, and I was full-time mom. So any kind of thought of a career in that direction was put on the back burner. And I became very involved. Writing is how I express myself. I love to write, and I started writing curriculum for our church and working with our pastors and our leadership team, doing children's curriculum, adult small group curriculum. Loved it. And just as way goes on to way, I was starting to dip my toe in the water of going to writers' conferences, thinking, well, maybe I want to write for a career. And I remember being at a writers' conference up at Seattle Pacific University. They did, I don't know if they still do these conferences, but they did these fabulous writers' conferences. And you go and you meet with editors and you pitch your ideas, and people were like building their platforms and promoting themselves as speakers. And I was getting all caught up in this, in this realm, in this world. And I was sitting in the main plenary session, and I don't know if you remember Gordon MacDonald, who wrote Ordering Your Private World. He was the speaker, and I don't even remember exactly what he was teaching on, but it was just one of those moments where you feel like God is speaking to you. And I felt like he was saying, I'm not doing it for you like this. Like whatever all this is, I'm not going to do it like this for you. And it was just kind of crazy. It wasn't long after that. I never went back to a writer's conference, but out of the blue, I got a call from someone who knew someone who heard of me and knew that I wanted to write, who was an editor at the Tacoma News Tribune. And she said, um, so and so, who was the page designer for the newspaper, gave me your name, and I just had a freelancer quit on me. I need this story on Lakewold Gardens by Monday. I'll send you out with a photographer. Would you go out and interview the director and write this full? It was the front page of the South Sound um, uh, section, and I was like, I'd never done anything like that in my life, and I did it, and it was amazing. And then she ended up giving me the job, and from then on, I did a lot of freelancing for them. But all that being said, I ended up just word of mouth. Working for Navigators in Colorado Springs. Someone handed me a magazine on a beach and said, Arlyn, you like to pray, which I do. It was a magazine called Pray. And I looked at it and I went, well, some of the stuff I'd done for church, they would like this. So I sent it in and they bought it. I mean, they bought everything I sent them and asked if I would come on staff as a columnist. So I ended up writing a monthly column for them on prayer. And then they asked if I would write a couple books for them, which I did on prayer and kids ministry. And when that periodical folded, some of the authors that I'd worked with came to me and said, well, the magazine's folded. Would you work with us on our books? And so I did. And word of mouth again, no putting myself out there, no striving, no trying to, beef up my accolades or which the flesh kind of wants to do, right? Like I should be working at this, I should be building this, I should be putting myself out there. And I just felt like the Lord just said, no, I've got this. I'm your promoter. And that was 10 years ago. And I've had Inspira Literary Solutions for the last 10 years. And now I've got 3 editors working for me and 3 designers and a marketing specialist and an amazing project manager that keeps my head on straight. And we've done over 100 books. And that's not because of me. I don't say that because like, yay, me. But to look back and see how God completely orchestrated and arranged every step of the way has been such a lesson in, Jesus, take the wheel.
That is so great. That's so great to hear. And sometimes we want to create our own path, right? We think we've got this. And so a lot of times listening is the key, being able to understand that, oh, I'm being called to this. Was an amazing thing for you. Is there any, just in that, is there something that you would recommend to others about listening?
Listening or obeying or responding. Maybe obeying's the wrong word, or responding. I mean, I think I have a very interactive relationship with the Lord. And that's come over time as you think you hear something or you think you're sensing something, you'll hear people say, oh, God's leading me to do such and such. Well, I don't think you know for sure until you move out in faith on what you think you're hearing. And I mean, it's just like really any relationship. When you meet someone the first time and they're all unfamiliar, you don't know their motives. You don't know what their voice sounds like. You don't know all the nuances of their personality. But as you get to know them, right? Like if you hear your spouse speaking in the next room, you recognize her voice, right? Because you know her. And, I think the same is true with God. The longer we get to know him, if we cultivate that relationship, we know when it's him speaking to us, when it's the Spirit of God speaking to us. And then the more that you move out in faith and see blessing, the easier it is to respond the next time. Or if I miss it, right? And then I can see, oh, I missed it. It makes me quicker to respond the next time. Does that make sense?
Oh, that makes so much sense. In fact, as you're talking, I'm nodding and nodding because as far as that's kind of been my experience too, is like at first you're saying, is that just me talking? Or am I being directed? And you don't trust it. right away. But then as time goes on, like you say, it's a growing process. And you say, oh, that is, and I feel much more comfortable today than I did 5 years ago or 10 years ago, recognizing the voice, if you will. And it's
Right.
not a voice, it's a feeling, I guess, for me anyway. So
So
very
it's
cool.
most often a feeling. Once in a while, it's almost like there's words inside of my brain. Like if it's a really, I'm such a word person.
Yeah.
God must know that about me, but it's like almost like across the inside of my brain. Do this or don't do this.
Yeah, he knows your love for reading, so he takes advantage of that for sure. So cool. So now, as a Christian along the path, there have been probably some joyous, real obvious, and that was one of them. Actually, you just described a great one where it's really obvious that you're being spoken to and that God is showing off in His own way. Are there any other kind of situations where you say, "Oh, wow, that's huge," and that's from God,
Related to my career or my writing or anything or just
or
any.
anything, or just in personal life?
I'll tell you something that convinced me of the power of prayer. And it was a really, really crazy thing that happened. And this was probably 25 years ago. Like it was a long time ago. I was a young mom and we had the news on, and there was a story on the news about a 4-year-old child that had been lost on Mount Rainier and they couldn't find him. And of course, that just struck my mama's heart, and I just wept for this little toddler, this 4-year-old that was out on Mount Rainier. It was cold, and the parents would be looking for it. And I just was compelled to pray. And so I just started praying, and I'm getting tears just thinking about this, right? And I just started praying and crying out for safety for this little boy. And for some reason, and I pray outside, I pray out loud a lot. And so I was praying out loud, and the words just came out of my mouth. And I said, God, if that little boy, if he's alive, would you just give him the sense to cover himself up, like with leaves or anything that he can find, just to keep himself warm until somebody can get to him? And I thought, why would I pray that? Like it just flew out of my mouth. Well, the next day I was watching, I had the news on again, and they had the report, and my head snapped up, and I went, what? And they said, this child had been found and he'd stayed alive on the mountain overnight, and that he'd had the sense to cover himself up with leaves and keep warm during the night. And I about dropped through the floor. My chin was on the floor. And I just went, what? Like, why did I think about that? Why did God put that in my heart to pray that? How did that even happen? And it's one of those things that I just went, okay, well, if I don't know how that works, but I'm going to pray more because clearly something's going on here.
Wow. Was that all prior to you writing about prayer in the column? Or was
It
that
was it was right probably about the time I'm thinking this probably happened around 2004 in my head, like the early 2000s that happened. And I went to work for Pray Magazine in 2005. So yeah, it was just kind of leading up to that and really building in me a really belief in a real belief in the power of prayer.
very cool? So yeah, if I was, you wrote on prayer, a column on prayer for, was it
Hmm.
multiple years?
Hmm.
And so if I were to ask you, for someone struggling with prayer,
Hmm.
what they might do, just in a capsule form, just a life hack, if you will, to better um, feel prayer and pray. Do you have
Yes, two things.
good?
Uh, Okay, so you know the Lord's Prayer, right? So it's in Luke chapter 11, and the disciples went to Jesus and they said, teach us to pray. So Jesus does two things in that prayer. And it's funny because we memorize that prayer, but sometimes you know how things are really familiar that you kind of lose sight of the forest for the trees. But if you kind of step back, and Jesus teaches them to consider God in two ways. Realize that who you're talking to is your father and he's your friend. So how would you speak to your father and how would you speak to your friend? So just relax and not feel like you're being too formal. And the other thing is, it says in First John, it says, if we pray according to his will, we know that he's heard us and we have the thing that we've asked of him. Well, how else do we know we're praying God's will but if we're praying scripture? So when I first started really like praying more, I would take Bible verses and I would put the name in or the situation in that verse, and I would just literally read it. Like, because I
Hmm.
was not, confident. But there was someone that I was praying about that was not in a great place in their life. And I found Ephesians chapter 1, where it talks about, I pray that the eyes of your heart may be enlightened and you would know the hope of his calling. And I just put her name in the margin, and I'd go back to my Bible and I pray for her and I put her name in that Bible verse, and I just kept praying Bible verses over her. And I watched her life completely turn around. Now, I'm not saying it was only my prayers that did that, but that's the cool thing about prayer is it's like how God lets us partner with what he's doing by bringing us in the process, and he's bringing other people in the process too. And I think when we get to heaven, he's going to turn the tapestry over and let us see all the workings at the back and how everything came together. And we're going to find out that our prayers did something in the lives of the people around us. So that's my my encouragement. He's your father, he's your friend. If you don't have the words, just pray Bible verses because that's his will. You know he's going to do it.
Perfect. So good. So good. Thank you so much. So now I got to flip the script just a bit and say, what about were there times in your life, a time in your life where you said, yikes, where was God there? I mean, I was praying for this thing and it didn't happen. Um, what about those challenges?
I think, like most people, that happens when people die. And, you're praying for healing and they're a really amazing person and you feel like their life should not be over. And it's just so hard to fathom why they're not healed or I think that's probably the places that I've questioned the most.
Hmm.
Uh, yeah.
Okay. All
You
right.
want
So
to hear about that?
let's talk about the book. The book
Okay.
which just released, and it is very. I'm told that since you're a mother of five, I've been told that releasing a book is like giving another birth. Is that true?
Have you written a book?
No.
We need to talk because that's what I do, as I help people write books. And I compare myself all the time to a midwife. That's like I use that analogy. That's what it feels like. So people come to me pregnant with an idea, and myself with my own books too, pregnant with an idea. And then I walk with them through the carrying of this child and then birthing them into the world. And then I just see them go so many amazing places with their books. So yes, that's such a great analogy.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Well, I wonder if podcasts work for that. Whether it's giving birth to a podcast. Maybe.
Probably. Yeah, I think so.
So, Encounters at the Well,
Mhm.
Encounters at the Well, is the new book. That's the title of the new book. It's available on Amazon. We're going to put the how to get right to it in the show notes here. But tell us where that idea came from and a little bit about the book itself.
Okay. It's actually the first of three. So there's two more coming out on the heels of it. Um, the original material I started creating and working with and writing back in 2007. So it's material that I have taught to women's groups at retreats, at conferences, and I've used it, I've interacted with it. Um, so it's been a very long gestation.
Okay. Yeah.
But it's loosely based. This one is loosely based on the woman at the well, and it's 9 sessions. 8 of them are interactive sessions. The first one's kind of an interactive session or an introductory session that helps women go to the heart issue of the things that are holding them back from really experiencing the abundant life that Jesus promised. So in that story, in John chapter 4, if you're not familiar with it, go back and read it. Jesus encounters this woman at the well, and it's at a not a normal time of day when the women would be there. And he interacts with her, engages her, they have an encounter, and asks her for some water. And it's funny because she tries to make it about religion when she realizes he's Jewish and she's a Samaritan. And she's immediately defaults to, well, you're Jewish, theologians say we're supposed to worship this way and we say this, and he just sweeps that away. He says this is not about religion, this is about your heart. And he just goes straight to her heart, and she receives that. And in fact, when he tells her that he has living water for her that will never run dry, and forgives her and accepts her for these dark places she's been in her life, she runs into the city and she says, "You're never going to believe this. I met this man who told me everything, everything about my life." And most of us, would we want someone telling us everything about our life? Like most, that would not be a happy thing. But when Jesus does it, he does it without condemnation. He does it without judgment. He does it in such a way that he's bringing it out of the darkness into the light so that he can cleanse it and wash it away with that living water. And I think we all need that. Like this book is for women, but I mean, really, we all need that. We all need those places of our heart exposed, because we're always walking around with regret. We're always walking around with shame. We're always walking around with comparison and competition and rejection. And that's what this book is about. It's like, okay, let's just stop stuffing those things down further and hoping nobody's going to notice, and go to the well at the other time of day when nobody's there and nobody's going to notice me. And instead, you know what? We're going to do the hard thing, and we're going to expose it to Jesus and let him heal it. And so really what the book does is it replaces the lies with God's truth about who he says we are, and especially in those particular areas of our life. And then it does have like little checklists that you go through and kind of go, is this part of my game? Am I dealing with rejection? Am I dealing with shame? Am I dealing with comparison and competition? And then if I am, just calling it a spade and just repenting. I mean, there's a scripture in Acts 3 that says, repent that times of refreshing may come from the presence of the Lord. And I've learned that repentance is this awesome thing that when something comes to my mind where I see I'm out of alignment with where I know God wants me to be, I want to run into that. I don't want to run away from that. I want to run into that because I want that refreshing. It's kind of like, learning to pray and seeing him answer prayer. It's like learning to run into the repentance and seeing him bring the refreshment and the forgiveness and the freedom. It's like, now I want to do that. So anyway, that's a long answer to a short question, but that's what this Bible study and the next two that are following on its heels help us do.
Can you reveal what the other two stories are centered around?
I can.
What's
So the second one is loosely based around Mary Magdalene, and my working title for that one is A Heart Restored. So the first one is the encounter at the woman of the well. The second one is the encounter of Mary Magdalene with Jesus at the home of Simon the Pharisee, when Simon doesn't even wash Jesus' feet, doesn't greet him in any of the normal ways of just polite society. And Mary comes in and just breaks her alabaster jar at his feet and just is broken, and just the healing and restoration that she experiences. And then the third one I'm especially excited about is loosely based on Joanna, who hardly anybody knows about, but you find her in Luke chapter 8, where there's a group of women that travel with the disciples. It's just this little obscure verse. And there's these women that travel with Jesus and they support him out of their own finances. And one of them is Joanna, the wife of Chusa, a servant of Herod. And I've done a little bit of research into who historians think she became, and it's really exciting. So I'm super excited about that one. And each one will unpack various, heart issues and circumstances that we all face
and
along the way.
it's designed as kind of a devotional. What's the best use of the book is in group get-togethers, small groups and that kind of thing.
Individuals. It's totally something someone can go through just by themselves, just for your own, I like to have a quiet time in the morning where I kind of just get my heart right before the day starts. And if you do that or something like that, it's perfect for that kind of a thing. Or one-on-one, if you're getting together with a friend or a neighbor and you're, just kind of have a mentoring relationship or disciple or peer-to-peer. But it's also great for women's groups. Yeah, to get women's Bible studies, churches, organizations. So it's very flexible.
Yeah. Have you been, or are you in a women's group, a small group like that, with personal experience in those kinds of get-togethers?
Yes. So I am not currently right this second because I have so much else going on. So I always try to be, but I have been in the past the director of women's ministry at my church. So organizing ministry for women and leading Bible studies and doing a lot of teaching. So this is actually the first year that I haven't been involved. I'm taking classes at seminary. Actually, I'm going for a master's in theological studies. So this is I haven't shared that with a lot of people, so this is going to get posted. Now people are going to know, but I've had to pull back on some other things to be paying attention to that. But normally, yes, I am.
And so then the follow-up question to that is what do you have any suggestions on pulling together a group of women? Is there a technique or are there characteristics of women that work, or is there a size of a women's group that's good or bad, or
No, I mean any size is good. Sometimes getting one or two people together and just good friends that are interested in these kinds of things and want to know more. Sometimes that's a safe place to start because you're not I mean it's a very intimate study and it's divided into three sections. So the first part of the chapter is that's the teaching part. And then the second part is the heart check. It's just you and God and a kind of a checklist and some sample prayers. And then the third part is called a circle of sisters, and there's discussion questions where you talk about these with other things. So it probably depends on your comfort level. But in the past, when I've done this, I mean, I've pulled together neighbors to do things like this. I've pulled together women who are already at my church, or I've pulled together women who have been out in the community that I know either through work connections, doing a I've done it with women in things like this, like meet up at Starbucks every week and just grab a table over in the corner and go through it together. But then other things that I've been involved with like this, an actual church will put it on and you'll have a group coming together and then you divide up into small groups. So I specifically wrote it so it could be used in all of those venues.
part of the reason why I asked that is because I know you helped out Jeff Kemp in his book, and Jeff Kemp is his mission really is to help men
Yes.
get together, on the masculine side, on the men's side, to get together and kind of give some interesting and helpful tips on, how you can make that actually in reality happen. And I've been very impressed. And he does a monthly get together online as well, which is very cool. So
Yeah, I get his newsletters. I get all about his huddles and stuff, and he's very good at that. Yes.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So you also did a book with Clint Gresham, another Seahawks.
Another Seahawk.
So you got into the Seahawks circle there. I have not
Did
done a podcast with Clint Gresham yet, but I'm hoping you're going to be able to give me some contact information that I can
and
connect.
I don't want to speak for him, but I bet you he would do something like that. Clint
Cool.
is great. I was working with him on his book when he got cut from the Seahawks.
Ooh.
And that was a really difficult time. And he navigated that with such unbelievable grace. And his book is called Becoming. And it was about really coming into his identity outside of being a football player. And it just was so God's divine timing that you're writing a book about your identity and then you get cut from the very thing that you were finding your identity in. So yeah, that was a great experience.
I did read that book too, and it was very enlightening because I think everybody, no matter what career you choose, ends up identifying that being their identity. And whether it's an athlete, in me in radio, I was in radio for 40 years, and then I wasn't all of a sudden, and it's like, wow, this is. I don't know if I can deal with this new identity or no identity at that point. So, yeah,
I,
absolutely great.
in retrospect, from looking how I moved along in my writing and editing career, um, I think I have to believe that was a huge part of the reason why that happened for me that way, so that I couldn't take an identity in it. Like there really was nothing of me and my efforts. It was very clear that God was orchestrating this and pulling the strings and making the connections. And because he didn't want me to take too much identity that this was something that I had done. So that's probably just healthy, God knowing me.
Well, fantastic. Well, this has been just an incredible period of time to speak with you and to know you're my neighbor and everything, and to find out so many incredible things you've done. Are you you're taking on new authors and would-be authors at this point in your career as well?
Absolutely. And my company is we do a lot of faith-based books, but not all of our books are faith-based. We've done a lot of business leadership books. I've done a number of textbooks that are being used at University of Washington, and I guess textbook would be putting it too formally, but books that are being used in academic situations that are not necessarily faith-based books. I've done coffee table books, children's books. So my authors range from just about every genre that we've done. And we say our tagline is idea in head to book in hand. So we have authors come to us when they haven't even started their book yet, and we walk them through concepting, and then we'll go chapter by chapter. You asked me a little bit about what developmental editing is.
That's my next
Um,
question. Yep.
okay, so can I just segue into that?
Yeah. So
So
what is that exactly? What how would you describe it?
developmental editing is often called structural editing. It's a conceptual process. So a lot of people think that editors just fix your grammar or fix your sentences or dot your I's and cross your T's. But developmental editing is really working with your ideas. Is this the best way to organize your ideas? Is this the best way to set up your book? Um, is there a logical flow of thought? Is the reader pulled all the way through? Are we keeping the reader engaged? How do we set up our chapters? What's the structure? How long are they? Do they open with an anecdote? And then we move into teaching? I mean, just dealing with the concepts as opposed to the mechanics. So obviously we do the mechanics, but we do that. Well, I call it the heavy lifting. Developmental editing is the heavy lifting at the front end, and then we get into the mechanics of the syntax and the grammar and the punctuation and all of that.
And then I got to ask, is there anybody that's come to you with a manuscript or an idea and you've said, this isn't going to work? I mean, is there a point where you say, with love
Yes.
that I don't think this is going to work?
Yes, that actually happened really, really recently, and it was someone whose spouse had passed, and the spouse had written a book, and the widow wanted to honor her husband by publishing his book, and there really was not enough substance in it. And if the author had been alive, I possibly could have worked with him, but I had to tell her for what it would have cost her, it wasn't worth it.
Gotcha. All right. Well, we have just some great inspirational information from you today, Arlyn, and thank you so much for taking the time. And I'm going to encourage our audience to support you in any way they can. If they're writing a book, to get a hold of you. If they want to read a book, to read one of your books. And thank you, thank you, thank you. I appreciate your time.
Oh, well, it's so good getting to know you, neighbor, and maybe I'll see you around on Fox Island.
Maybe. That sounds great. Thanks. Such a great life story, and a reminder that letting God take control is always the best plan. Thanks for listening and sharing this podcast today. I highly recommend her awesome book, Arlyn Lawrence. And if you're writing a book yourself, she would be the one to contact first. Have a great day. God bless. See you next time.